Back to Miller. Oh, my goodness.
Herbert.
Sidearm sling, and it's a touchdown.
Tyrese Maxey.
Oh, good spin move by Filipowski for the news. Give him 9.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beef Upfront podcast here on Pick Swap Media. Your host, Ryan Coyle, joined alongside Joe Kmetz for, hard to say, but conference title weekend already. We were talking about it last week, how it feels like we were just up here talking about USC, San Jose State. Here we are, conference championship weekend. And I think, Joe, in the history of our time doing this show, 4 years now, this is the most anticipated conference championship weekend, at least in terms of chaos that could ensue, all the possible scenarios. One team that we've been saying over the past few weeks is most likely is going to get left out and have a real legitimate argument as to why they should be in. So there's a lot to break down. We'll get into everything. We'll touch on all 10 conference championship games, as well as give out some hypotheticals for who we think will be going to the playoffs. So Joe, welcome back. Big week, and how are we?
As always, be fantastic. Ready to talk some college football. And like you said, this is definitely, since we've been doing the show, the biggest conference title weekend. You can argue it's the biggest conference title weekend in the history of the playoff era.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the first time we've had 4 teams in the playoff era go 12-0 in the regular season. A lot of controversy surrounding Florida State with, Jordan Travis being done. A lot of people saying, well, now without them, are they really one of the 4 best? And I think you got to find a balance between the 4 best and also the 4 most deserving. Because at the end of the day, the games have to matter, in my opinion. Like, it's stupid to be like, oh, Florida State, if they were to win against Louisville, oh, they went 13-0. Well, their quarterback got hurt, so they're not getting in. Like, if Jordan Travis had gotten hurt against Louisville, they still would have put him in. It would not have been an issue. But because he got hurt against North Alabama and they struggled against Florida, they're like, oh, well, who knows. But very excited. A lot of question marks that are going to get answered this weekend.
All right, before we get into breaking down each and every game, we're going to give out some hypotheticals of who you would put in the playoffs if these scenarios happen. So, first scenario, all the favorites win. You have Oregon beats Washington, you have Texas beat Oklahoma State, you have Georgia beat Alabama, you have Michigan beat Iowa, and you have Florida State beat Louisville. So that means you'll have an undefeated Georgia, an undefeated Michigan, an undefeated Florida State, a 1-loss Texas, and a 1-loss Oregon. Who would you be putting in that scenario?
I personally would put in Texas because I just think Texas is better than Oregon.
You put in Texas over Oregon, not Florida State.
Yes, I do. I think Texas is better than Oregon. All the metrics that the committee claims that they use to make these decisions, Texas is better. So like strength of schedule, all this stuff, Texas is better than Oregon. The only thing that they don't have that compares to Oregon is their loss. They have a loss to Oklahoma, who's number 12, and Oregon has arguably the best loss in the country, a 3 or 4-point loss to Washington earlier in the year on the road. That's huge, but also this is an Oregon team that played like Portland State. Like, yes, the Pac-12 is a great conference this year, but also their strength of schedule is not where you want it to be. Like, Texas had the balls, and once again, this is where I come into the games matter. They played at Alabama and they won at Alabama, arguably the best win of the season.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, I would put Texas in. I think the committee would put Oregon at 4. Also, Brett McMurphy tweeted this out last night that going into conference title weekend, no team ranked lower than 6th has ever made it to the playoff. So that's something to keep note, as Texas is 7 and even Bama sitting at 8. You never know what could happen. I would say Texas. I think the committee would go with Oregon.
Yeah, in that scenario for me, unless Florida State goes out there and beats Louisville by at least double digits, maybe even 2 touchdowns, I think Florida State is going to get left out. I think it would probably be Georgia, Michigan, Oregon, and Texas. And you can say games matter all you want, but if Florida State goes out there and needs just say a last-second field goal to beat Louisville in like a 13-10 type of game, do you really think they're going to trot out Florida State to go play Georgia and be most likely like a 17.5 point dog, something like that? Like, when instead you could go and have Georgia play Oregon. I know we saw them play last year, but these are two completely different teams. That would be a much better matchup. Then you have, just say, Texas plays Michigan. Like that is going to be a much better playoff. And I heard Herb Street talking about it earlier. It's not doing the right thing or whatever. It's putting the best 4 teams at the end of the day in the playoff. And I don't think this version of Florida State, and I'm someone with a Florida State ticket. I got the Florida State at 20-1. Like, I want them to go. I would love to see them, but at full strength. Like, I don't know if they're going to be able to use that. You can look at it in the past at Cardell Jones and Ohio State and what he was able to do on that little run. But what we saw from Florida State last week wasn't that convincing. I know it was a rivalry game, a desperate Florida team. But at the same time, if they go out there and they struggle this week, the committee can't, I think, go to the table and be like, all right, this is going to be a good game, or it's just going to be a cakewalk by Georgia at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree, and I definitely think there is controversy there with Florida State. I personally didn't even put that into my head because I think regardless of what happens, the Pac-12 champ is in. I think the real chaos scenario, which we've talked about, and what they all said, you already can kind of see by my reaction, is if Bama beats Georgia, then I have no clue. But I'll let you, because you said you have more scenarios, so I don't want to start going too in depth. But
yeah, so let's say keep it with Oregon beating Washington, Texas beating Oklahoma State, Florida State beating Louisville, Michigan beating Iowa, and then Alabama knocks off Georgia. Then who would you put in?
So I think from there, Michigan would be the obvious one.
Regardless, I think most likely in 9 out of the 10 scenarios, probably the winner of the Pac-12 is definitely going.
Yes, I agree, and I think in this case they would go as well. The problem becomes to Bama. You're choosing between Bama, Texas, and Florida State for those last 3 spots.
Yeah,
I once again think, this is now where Coyle, I would be more agreeing with Florida State getting left out and then putting Bama and Texas in along with Michigan and the Pac-12 winner, which in this case, you said would be Oregon. And I know that's crazy to say Georgia not being in.
So then Georgia and Florida State get left out.
Yes. And it's tough to say that, but also like Texas once again beat Bama. And the whole point of the committee has always talked about your strength of schedule. Go out, play these games. Once again, they did. They went out. They went to Alabama and beat the Crimson Tide. I think it would become more controversial or a tougher decision if like Bama, Georgia is like a 3 to 7 point game. If it's like a thriller and both teams are even, then you're like, shit, we got a real tough decision to make. But
I think the committee wishes the ACC title game and the Pac-12 title game were flipped, because then if Louisville like knocks off Florida State, they know going into Saturday kind of what all the scenarios are. You have that ACC title game all the way Saturday night, Friday night. Like Friday night, I think regardless, whoever wins that game is going to be going unless they want to put Georgia in over one of them and want to put an undefeated Florida State in. So you have that. I mean, 99% chance Michigan beats Iowa. So like all eyes in that 8 o'clock window will be on that Florida State Louisville game. And it's going to be like a lot of teams are going to be rooting for Florida State to wind up losing that game, for Louisville to win, to give themselves a chance. So that also makes it, a very entertaining product as well there.
I think the committee would also be rooting for that too, make their lives a little bit easier come Selection Sunday, because once again, if Florida State's and they're undefeated, they're going to have the argument of, well, we're 13-0 coming out of the ACC. And I think beating Louisville, like you said, especially convincingly, would really help their argument. But, we'll see.
All right. Well, we could go on, hypotheticals, but 9 million more conversations on this. We have some actual games to break down, and then we can always, revisit this next week as well. But we have all 10 conference title games. We're going to go touch on each of the group of 5 ones and then go more in depth on the big games. We start on Friday night in the Conference USA game between 10-3 New Mexico State, who went 7-1 in the conference this year, at number 25 Liberty, a perfect 12-0, 8-0 in the conference. 7 o'clock on CBS Sports Network. Liberty is a 10.5-point favorite. Over under is 54.5.
I'm going Liberty here, 28-20. Conference USA, like most of the G5s, play at the higher ranked, or like the number one team's stadium. This game being at Liberty, I think, is going to be a big difference here. And also that's great for the G5s, because if they were playing this game at like in a neutral site, it would be like a 60% empty stadium. So I'm glad they're playing at Liberty. Going to be a great environment. I'm going with the Flames here, 28-20. Knocking off the Fighting Jerry Kills in New Mexico State. Shout out to the Aggies. First 10-win season since 1960. But that being said, Liberty's just a better team. It's plain and simple. And the last thing I'll say about this game, like I always say when New Mexico State comes up, the most frustrating team in America, because they have losses to UMass and Hawaii, who both UMass is god awful and Hawaii is not good either. But shout out to the Aggies.
Yeah, so for each matchup, I have some type of nugget related to betting or just historical in terms of the matchup. But for this one, it is New Mexico State has covered their last 10 games, and that also includes that road win against Auburn. But Liberty is a damn good team. Liberty covered this 10.5 earlier in the year when they played New Mexico State. And also Liberty has won by 11 or more in 9 of their 12 games this season. Jamie Chadwell, a very good coach. I don't think he's going to be at Liberty very long. I was kind of confused when he made that leap from Coastal Carolina to here. I thought it was a lateral move, but took the Flames here to an undefeated season. Hats off to him. I think he's going to be a coach where if he wants to go to a Power 5 type job this year, he will be able to if he wants to. Or if he can wait and potentially get a bigger job in a few years down the line, if he really makes Liberty kind of like, I don't know, like what Cincinnati maybe was the past few years, where they're fighting for 11-1, 12-0, maybe schedule a few tougher non-conference games, and they're right there in the playoff conversation. Once they get into this 12-team playoff as well, they could put themselves in that position. But I do think Liberty wins this one and covers. I'm going to go Liberty 35, New Mexico State 21. So Liberty minus 10.5 in the over of 54.5. All right, one of the big matchups, as we said at the beginning, probably I think the winner, 90% chance the winner of this game is going to go to the playoff, and that's the Pac-12 title game. Number 6 Oregon at 11-1, 8-1 in the conference versus number 4 Washington, 12-0, 9-0 in the conference. 8 o'clock kick on ABC. Oregon comes into this one as a whopping 9.5-point favorite, over under 66. Washington already knocked off Oregon at the beginning of the season.
I think, Coyle, especially kind of like you were saying, if Washington wins, they are a lock. There's no doubt in my mind they go to the playoff. Washington's sitting there at 3, actually. I thought they were 4 when I was looking earlier, but Washington's sitting there at 3. I think if they win, there's no scenario where they could be jumped by Florida State, by Texas and Bama coming from 7 and 8. I don't think there's a shot they get past Washington. I think Washington would move up to 2 in the the doomsday scenario of the SEC, Bama winning. I think it would be Michigan 1, Washington would get to 2 there. That being said, though, I like Oregon to win this game, but the one thing that scares me, so does everyone. Everybody I've seen, I feel like, kind of like how you were saying last week with everyone being on Michigan in the Ohio State-Michigan game, I feel like everyone is on Oregon. Yep. I am one of those people. I think Oregon's going to win the rematch. I think this game not being in Seattle is a big difference. I know Ducks fans travel. This game being in Vegas is going to be a really cool atmosphere. It was cool last year when we had Utah USC. That being said, I'm going Oregon 35, Washington 32. I'll take Washington to cover because I think 9.5 is a lot for 2 teams that are so evenly matched. I'm going with the over 66 here. I initially put 35-31 and realized that was a push. So I bumped it up to 32 just so I could pick the over here. Going to definitely stay away from the total, like Washington to cover. And this is a big game, too, for Bo Nix. If Bo Nix balls out, I think he wins the Heisman, even though I think Daniels at LSU has been the better quarterback. I think Bo Nix, the way a lot of Heisman voters vote is, Oregon will be in the playoff hunt, whereas LSU has 3 losses. If Bo Nix puts up a good stat line, I could very well see him winning the Heisman in this game, having a Heisman moment late, leading a game-winning drive. Never thought I would be talking about Bo Nix winning a Heisman after all these years, but here we are. Give me the Ducks in a close game, This game's going to be a lot of fun. That's all I know. I think this is going to be, in my opinion, from like a fun factor, the most fun game of the week. Might not be the best, if that makes sense. I'm definitely not making sense, but I like this game. I think there's going to be a good amount of points. Going to be back and forth. No team's really ever going to be in control. Give me the Ducks.
Yeah, I think if you have some spare change lying around and you think Washington has a shot to win this one, Michael Penix is going to have a really good game. He's still on DraftKings at plus 600, or excuse me, plus 1,600 to win the Heisman. Just say he goes out there. This is like a 45-42 game. He has like 6 touchdowns. He throws for 400 yards, and he goes toe-to-toe with Bo Nix, and Jaden Daniels is over there sitting at home. Like, people are going to really respect that, and that would be their second win over Oregon, an undefeated season. I think it's worth kind of a look, and I'm still so surprised to see Washington that big of a dog in this matchup. 55% of the public are on, excuse me, Oregon right now. And I love Oregon and their balance. I think if they get in, they have a chance to win it all. And since Michael Penix has came to Washington, though, the Huskies are 23-2. And in those 2 losses, neither were by double digits, which with this one would have to be to cover that 9.5. He lost to UCLA by 8 and excuse me, and Arizona State by 7. I just think it's ludicrous that they're this big of dogs, and it's been like that for weeks. Like, all the books have been showing for the past few weeks that Oregon is a big-time favorite to win the Pac-12. I mean, Robidunzier is one of the best players in the country. Penix won't go down without a fight. And so many people are looking at the Ducks as pretty much a shoo-in here. Don't be surprised if Washington finds a way to win this one outright. I think some of what went right for Washington, as you said, playing at home. They had some missed field goals, Oregon. There was a few errors in the red zone that kind of didn't go Oregon's way. I mean, things just like that on a neutral field might reverse itself this time around. Maybe why Oregon is such a heavy favorite. But like I said, Washington 23-2 with Penix, have never lost by double digits in either of those losses. Like, I don't think this is going to be a blowout at all. Penix is kind of like a man on a mission. And I expect this to be a really good game. I'm going to take Oregon to ultimately win it, but I do love the play of the Huskies plus 9.5. So I'm going to go Oregon 30, Washington 27, Washington plus 9.5 in the under of 66. 2 quick notes on this game. In 9 of the 12 Pac-12 title games since it became the Pac-12 from the Pac-10, the winner took it home with a victory of 10 points or more. So you can point to that as maybe why Oregon's that 9.5 point favorite. But also the underdog has won the last 4 games outright in the Pac-12 title game. So that's something to note as well in terms of when you're going to be picking either Oregon or Washington. If you think Washington is going to cover that 9.5, you might as well just take the shot on them on the money line, or even, like I said, on the sprinkle of Penix with the Heisman. All right, now we transition over to Saturday, where we have 8 games. Big 12 title game kicking off at noon. Number 20, Oklahoma State at 9-3, 7-2 in the conference. Versus number 7, Texas, 11-1, 8-1 in the conference. Noon kick on ABC. Texas is a 15-point favorite. Over/under is 55.
I'm going with Texas here, 45-31. So I'll take Oklahoma State to cover that 15.5. I'm going to take the over. If we were doing locks of the week this week, but we're talking about every game, that would be my lock. Really love the over in this game. This just comes down to Quinn Ewers is the better quarterback in this game. And also Gundy has shown he's gotten to this stage in the past. A couple of years ago when Oklahoma State got stuffed on the 1-inch line where the running back and the defensive back for Baylor were in a foot race to the corner and Oklahoma State didn't get there. Oklahoma State in 2011 losing to like a bad Iowa State team, ending up number 3 and watching, Alabama LSU rematch in the national title game. We've had this a lot where Mike Gundy seems like he can't cross the finish line. Not necessarily not win the big one because, you've seen him beat Oklahoma before. You've seen him, win some games against Texas. I just think he's going to get to the stage in a team that almost lost to BYU last week, has a loss to UCF, weird up and down team, Oklahoma State. They have lost to South Alabama on their schedule.
Blowout to UCF.
Yeah. I mean, they're just a weird team. I'm going to go with Texas to win this one. I just think Oklahoma State is a good team, not great. However, I think they're definitely going to cover 15.5. I think it's a ton of points. But this is a huge opportunity for Oklahoma State if they prove me wrong, which I always root for chaos. So I would, love if I was wrong with this. They can set themselves up for, hey, Texas, you're leaving. Oklahoma, you're leaving. Rest of the Big 12, we are going to be the top dogs of this new conference next year. But that being said, I still think Texas is just way too talented.
Yeah, I mean, what bigger way for Oklahoma State to say F you to Texas than sending them out of the Big 12 without a ring in a year that they were pretty heavy favorites coming into it and no berth to the college football playoff. Then Oklahoma State just knocking them off here outright. We're going to get some real chaos this weekend, and I predict this is the one. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I wouldn't be surprised to see Texas do what they did to Texas Tech last week and win by 40-plus points in this game. But I think we're going to have some fun. We're going to have one major wrinkle get thrown in there, and this is going to be it for me. Ollie Gordon, one of the best running backs in the country against Texas, who does have the fourth best rushing defense in the country, so it's best on best. He's going to have to break a few big runs if they're going to want to compete in this game and have a chance to win it. But I think Mike Gundy has some tricks up his sleeves this week. They're not going to be holding anything back. They have the chance to really just eliminate Texas and any lasting memory of the Big 12 before they leave for the SEC. I think he's going to take advantage of Steve Sarkisian and maybe like a dumb coaching mistake, whether it's something at the end of the half or at the end of the fourth quarter. Maybe we see some crazy things in overtime. I think this is going to be a very chaotic game, some pandemonium, and really start the Saturday off with some fireworks. I'm going to go Oklahoma State winning it outright. Big time upset, 38-35. So Oklahoma State plus 15 and the over of 55. And then a quick note on this matchup. The last 5 matchups between Oklahoma State and Texas have all gone over 55 points. The last time the Big 12 championship game, though, was won by more than 15 points was back in 2017 between Oklahoma and TCU. So typically in this Big 12 title game, we get a pretty close one. So historically, they like to play with Oklahoma State there to cover that 15. All right, now we go to the MAC title game. One of their group of 5 games. Miami of Ohio at 10-2, 7-1 versus Toledo, who is 11-1 and 8-0 in the conference. Noon kickoff on ESPN as well. Toledo -8 and the over/under is 44.
Shout out to the Rockets really quick. Great season, 11-1. A game-winning Illinois field goal away from potentially being the leader in the clubhouse in terms of the G5. Still have an opportunity if they need obviously a ton of help. They would need Liberty to lose and Tulane, who's coming up, to also lose if they wanted to get into a New Year's Six bowl bid. But that being said, I think Toledo's just a better team. They played earlier in the year, these two teams. I'm going with the Rockets 31-20. I'm going to take Toledo -8. I'm going to take the over 44. I feel like 44 is a little low, so I'm going to take that to cover.
Yeah, my note on this matchup, Joe, 15 of the last 19 MAC title games have gone over 44, and Miami of Ohio is 9-3 against the spread this season. Toledo ran their way to 11-1 and 8-0 in the conference. Penny Boone is one of the more underrated players in all of college football due to playing at a school like Toledo, but he ran for over 1,300 yards and 15 rushing touchdowns this year. Miami of Ohio did hold him to only 73 yards and 17 carries, one of his worst performances, if not his worst performance of the season. But Toledo still found a way to win that game 21-17. So even if he's just a little bit better, they should be able to win this game again. I expect a better performance from Boone this time around and Toledo to get it done again. But Miami with that 9-3 against the spread this year, I'll take them to cover the number. I'm going to go Toledo 27, Miami of Ohio 21. So Miami of Ohio +8 and the over of 44, hitting just like a lot of those MAC title games in the past half. All right, we go to the 3 o'clock window now. We go to the Mountain West. 7-5, Boise State, 6-2 in the conference, fired their coach, and here they are in the conference title game at UNLV, 9-3, 6-2 in the conference. Boise State is a 2.5-point favorite. Over/under is 58.5.
Yeah, weird move, and I know Boise State. I was saying in the beginning of the year, we had them on for the Washington game. I thought they were going to be the New Year's Six representative out of the G5. Obviously, that's not the case, but I do think it's a little crazy to fire your coach. Like, I know 7-5, they expect better out there, but you still finish in a 3-way tie for first in the Mountain West, which is still a pretty solid conference. But that being said, kind of like I was saying earlier, you have a 2-point loss to UCF. You have another really close loss to Colorado State by a point. You have a 3-point loss at Memphis. If just a couple things swing differently, Boise State's all of a sudden a 10-2 football team. So I think the firing was a little crazy. Obviously, I haven't been in-depth about Boise State. Haven't been following them, living and dying by their every move. But I'm going to go Boise State here, 33-21. UNLV's having a great year. I hope I'm wrong. But this is just one of those, I'm going to take the team that is constantly there, constantly the top dog in the conference. Give me the Broncos. I'm going to take a -2.5. I do like the under 50, under 58.5. We almost had another math moment like last week. Under 58.5.
Yeah, I remember week 1, Boise State was on the show as well. They had that game against Washington, and Washington absolutely steamrolled them. But like you said, they always seem to be right up here at the top of the conference. It was weird. Might have been one of those mutual kind of firing things. But I think UNLV has been one of the feel-good stories of the year in college football and their turnaround. They are 10-2 against the spread this year, and they covered their last 8 games as an underdog. So this is a team that has been making people a lot of money as well if you've been tailing them. A win here, though, for UNLV would mark their first double-digit win season in program history. We touched about this earlier in the season, probably week 6 or 7. But as their 1984 season, they won 11 games. They had all those wins vacated. So that was the most wins in program history. They never had 10 wins since then. So just an unreal accomplishment if they're able to do this, get this win in the conference title game, and then they have the chance in the bowl game as well if they don't. But still, a very historic season for UNLV. I'm going to have them going out on top. I think it's dumb to fade them against the spread with how good they've been all year, 10-2 against the spread. If they can keep it under 2, you might as well take them outright to win it as well. This has been a resilient bunch and a team that just finds a way to win football games. So I'm going to go UNLV 30, Boise State 27, UNLV plus 2.5, under 58.5, and Barry Odom should be up there for one of the coaches of the year in college football. All right, here's the big boy, probably the one that everyone's looking forward to the most. SEC championship game, number 1, Georgia, 12-0, 8-0, putting their perfect record on the line, that historic win streak that they're on. First, number 8, Alabama, 11-1, 8-0 with that lone loss to Texas. 4 o'clock kickoff on CBS down in Atlanta. Georgia is a 5.5-point favorite walking into this matchup, and the over-under is 55.5.
I mean, it's got to be Bama. I'm going Bama 28, Georgia 24. I'm going to take them plus 5.5. I'm going to go the under 54.5. I think this is going to be a back and forth game. This is going to be the best game. You know, I was arguing or saying something earlier with the Oregon-Washington game. This is going to be one of those games where every single play is going to feel so important. I don't know what my parents were laughing at in there. I thought someone was dying. This is just
funny.
Because would not have been funny if one of them were dying, but this is by far the biggest game of the week. Georgia, obviously, it's winning in. Bama, if they win, then the chaos begins for the committee. And kind of like I've been saying, Coyle, for the past couple of weeks, we haven't really had that weekend of chaos yet. It would be very appropriate heading into conference title weekend if this happened. If Texas were to also, like, if you were to start seeing a lot of these games flip, because, you know, everyone kind of in their head is saying, well, Georgia's going to beat Bama. I don't know if that's going to really happen. I think Bama is going to win the game.
I'm right there with you, Joe. It's weird to say. I think they're going to win it as well. A quick few nuggets on this matchup. Over the last 10 matchups between Alabama and Georgia, only 3 of them have been decided by 6 or less. 2018, Alabama won 26-23. In 2012, Alabama won 32-28. And in 2003, Georgia won 37-23. So if you think that Georgia's going to win this game, take them to cover. Don't even consider taking Alabama to cover. We see it kind of time and time again. But another one stat I saw on Twitter from BFaucus22, Ben Faucus, I believe his name is. Since the start of the 2010 season, the Alabama Crimson Tide have been favored in 190 of their 193 games. All 3 times they've been an underdog have been versus Georgia. And Saturday will be number 4 as Georgia is that 5.5-point favorite against Bama in the SEC title game. So pretty insane numbers there. But my point being with this, if you think Bama is going to keep it close, you might as well take them outright to win as well, as you rarely see an underdog cover in this matchup between these two. Also, the last 10 SEC title games, only one has been decided, or excuse me, the last 10 SEC title games have been decided by 6 points or more. The only one that was a 6-point loss was Florida against Alabama back in 2020. And I believe there was like a late touchdown there that got thrown in. So despite the hype usually surrounding this game, it is rarely close. And we usually see one team kind of just dominate the other. So I've been riding this Alabama train over the second half of the season with that win over Auburn last week. They kind of just give me that team of destiny type vibes. And I think Georgia is due to slip up sometime. We talked about it at the beginning of this season. I talked about it in the preseason with my coverage. We haven't seen a team three-peat in college football since Minnesota in the 1930s. I think they're due to slip up eventually. There's just too many good other programs out there for Georgia to just be able to steamroll their way to 3 more wins and another national title. I think this is a perfect spot to slip up. Alabama is kind of playing with house money after last week, and Alabama knows that they're playing for their lives as well and a chance at the playoff. Jalen Milroe, man on a mission. I'm going to go Alabama winning it 35-27. So Bama plus 5.5 and the over of 54.5 hitting there. All right, we go to the American. Now, hit on this one quickly. SMU at 10-2, 8-0 in the conference. At number 23, Tulane, 11-1 and 8-0 in the conference. A 4 o'clock kickoff on ABC. Tulane -5 over under 47. And with that great SEC game hopefully on, I wonder how many people are really going to be tuned into this one.
Yeah, this is one of those, like, I'm surprised that the American wouldn't announce like a noon kickoff or, like a 8 p.m. kick. I know obviously with all 10 conferences having conference title games, it's not like it was a couple of years ago, but having the amount of games, this is just a little side note, of course, I'm getting sidetracked, that are starting in between, like the G5s are starting in between 3:30 and 4 o'clock are wild to me. I'm amazed there's not 1 or 2 more on Friday night because everyone's going to be watching the SEC. Anyways, back to this game. I like Tulane here 30-16. I'm going to take Tulane to cover the 5 points. I'm going under 47. And this is just, I've been saying about Tulane all year and whenever they come on the show, they're a very good team. If Pratt, I always forget the quarterback's name too when this comes up, doesn't get hurt, I think they'd beat Ole Miss. I think they would be 12-0. Obviously, there was zero chaos this year, so they wouldn't have a shot at the playoff. But I was thinking in the preseason, hey, if you want a real chaos scenario, Tulane, going undefeated after their great season last year maybe would set them up. But that being said, SMU also avoided playing Tulane and UTSA, the other 2 best teams in the conference record-wise in the regular season. I think that kind of comes into effect. Their 2 losses were both by 17 points to Oklahoma and TCU. They score a lot of points against bad teams. SMU, I think they're going to struggle against Tulane. I think Tulane has really kind of taken over, especially with SMU too, leaving next year to the ACC. Tulane setting themselves up to be the big dogs in this conference going forward.
Yeah, so the over-under in this one is 47. Tulane's last 6 home games have gone under the projected total for that matchup, and the total has gone under 47 as well in 5 of the 7 AAC title games. So look at the under as a potential play in this one. I love Tulane in this spot. They've been a very good team once again this year. Would be shocked if Fritz isn't poached by a bigger job by the time the carousel's over. Their only loss was that one that you were touching on at the beginning of the season against Ole Miss. So this has been a good team week in and week out. Tulane's defense last week shut down UTSA and Frank Harris, who was coming off one of his best games of the season the week before. And they've shut down most of their opponents all year. As we noted, their last 6 home games have gone under the total. So they're a team that plays really good defense, especially at home. It is a tall task stopping an SMU team with a high-level offense. They've scored 31 or more in every conference game this season. But I do like Tulane at home here with the chance to go to the New Year's Six Bowl. I'm going to go Tulane 24, SMU 20. So SMU does cover the 5, but the under of 47 hits. All right, we go to the Sun Belt title game now. 8-4 App State, 6-2 in the conference. At Troy, who's 10-2, 7-1 in the conference. 4 o'clock kickoff on ESPN. Troy's a 6.5-point favorite. Over under is 52.5.
So, Coyle, speaking of our guy Ben Fawkes or Fawkes, I actually have a tweet from him pulled up that I saved about this game. 90% of the money is on Troy to cover the spread right now. He's tweeting for Bet Rivers. I don't know what it is on the other sports books, but I would assume it's similar numbers. That's actually the highest, amount of money on any team spread going into conference championship weekend. So that being said, I'm going to kind of fade the public here with my pick. I'm going Troy to win 35-32. So I'll take App State to cover that 6.5. Like the over in this game. Hammering the over actually with my prediction. Haven't watched a lick of these 2 play football. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to pretend to break this game down. I'm just going with Troy being at home. Troy 10-2, very good team. Really wish the Sun Belt would allow James Madison to play. I think it'd be a fantastic rematch between Troy and JMU. But that being said, I'm going to take the Trojans here with, I believe, would be their 2nd straight Sun Belt title.
I think so.
Or at least conference, the title game title. So shout out to the Trojans, having them winning a close one. with App State, there's always weird stuff. That's all I can say. I feel like we're gonna get something weird. I think this was the Hail Mary that was tipped last year, where game day was at App State. I think it was something like that. But I think Troy's gonna win a close game.
Did the Sun Belt just get moved up to the FBS recently?
I think it's like the newest one, but a lot
Right.
of teams in the Sun Belt, like App State, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, were all FCS that moved up.
Because when you look at the Sun Belt title game history, there's only been 4 of them. There would have been 5, but the one got canceled for COVID. So I was
Well,
kind of confused in that regard.
they started the NCAA used to have a rule where you needed to have divisions to have a title game, but they fixed it because the Big 12 was pissed off the first year of the playoff when TCU went 11-1 and got left out for Cardale Jones and Ohio State. They won the title, obviously, but then they made a rule you didn't need divisions. And then even for a while, still the Sun Belt didn't have a title game, but then in like 2018 or 19 or whatever, they started having one. But yeah, no, it's relatively new.
Yeah, so in each of the 4 Sun Belt title games, the winner has won by 6 or more points, and with the spread there at 6.5, that's something to take into account. I think Troy has lost twice this year, once to K-State and the other to that 11-1 JMU team, who should be in this game, as we've touched on a few times this year. And their only loss was actually to App State. So hats off to App State. But Troy's running back, quick note on him, Kamani Vidal will be the best player on the field in this game. I watched them when they were on the show that one week for a little bit. He ran for 1,300 yards and 6 touchdowns this year. And with Troy being at home, they have the best player, I think, on the offensive side of the ball in this matchup. I think that is a formula for success. And the stat about how this game is usually a convincing win, I'm going to take the Trojans to cover here too. So I'm going to go 28-17. Troy wins. Troy minus 6.5 and under 52.5. All right, now to the Big Ten title game, second to last matchup. Number 2, Michigan at 12-0, 9-0 in the conference versus 16 Iowa, 10-2, 7-2 in the conference. 8 o'clock kick on Fox. Michigan a 22-point favorite. Over under is 35.
I'm going Michigan here at 33, Iowa 6. Fitting to have Iowa getting 2 field goals. I was texting one of my friends. He's a Michigan fan. And I was saying I can't wait till – I think Iowa's going to force a turnover at the very beginning of the game. They're going to go up 3-0 after having a 3-play drive go 5 yards. But they'll be at the Michigan 20, kick a field goal, and then that'll be it. Michigan, the last 2 Big Ten title games they've played in, have absolutely smashed Iowa 2 years ago, and then Purdue last year. They smoked them. I think 22 points is a lot, but it's been Iowa's MO all year with their terrible offense. Michigan could win this game 24-0 in my opinion. It wouldn't shock me if that happened. Iowa's defense is legit, but I just think Michigan can get, the over-under being 35 as well. I'm taking the over because I think Michigan could get near 35 on their own. All I need is Iowa to get 1 or 2 field goals, which a little scary with them. I think on DraftKings, Coyle, you sent it. It might have been their first half and second half over-under point total was sitting at 0.5 point, which is so pathetic on so many levels. But I hope they can at least get a field goal in this game. I'm going to risk it with the over. Never feel good taking an over with Iowa, but I'm going with the over in Michigan minus 22.
Yeah, actually, in 12 of the last 15 matchups between Michigan and Iowa, I know there's been, different regime in there in Michigan, and Iowa used to be pretty competent on offense, not really anymore, but 12 of the last 15 matchups between these two schools have gone over this projected 35, if you want to take some historical context into it. I'm going to take Michigan to win this one, obviously, but I will actually take Iowa to cover. I think you have to give this team some credit, even with their incompetence on the offensive side of the ball. They found their way to 10-2, and they would be 11-1 with that only loss being to Penn State, and then who was a 10-2 team. And if it weren't for that missed call in that Minnesota game on the punt return, they would have won that game and been sitting here at 11-1 and probably in the top 10. I think it's just a sense of pride and toughness for this team. The way they just find a way to hang around and win football games. They only scored 22 touchdowns on offense the entire year. If you look at LSU, who finished first in the country, they scored 74. So just shows you they were playing basically 2 different sports, and they still found their way to 10-2 in a Power 5 conference. I don't care if it was the Big Ten West and how bad it is. That's still somewhat of an accomplishment. And I think that this team just has a lot of pride on the defensive side of the ball, and they're just a tough group. I think they're going to find a way to kind of stick around. I do think Michigan will wind up winning it convincingly. I have Michigan 27, Iowa 7. So I will take Iowa plus 22 and the under of 35 just hitting there. But I think Michigan finds a way to win this one pretty easily in the second half to kind of pull away. But I am going to let Iowa hang around in the first half for a little bit. All right, and our final game of the night, and it could be a big one in terms of determining who goes and who stays for the playoff. You have the ACC championship, 10-2 Louisville, 7-1 in the conference versus Florida State, 12-0, 8-0 in the ACC, 8 o'clock on ABC. FSU is a 2.5-point favorite, over under 48.5. Will FSU get it done, Joe, and go to the playoff like you said?
They will not. I have Louisville winning this game 38-35. So I'll take Louisville to cover. Going to take the over 48.5. I think Florida State, having another week without Travis to kind of get the offense going, I think they're going to be clicking. I think Florida State's going to be able to put up a lot of points. But Louisville, at the end of the day, has their starting quarterback. Florida State doesn't. And I know, Louisville had that inexcusable loss at home to your biggest rival in Kentucky. Especially with all the rumors about Stoops potentially leaving, I'm very surprised they dropped that game. Especially they were up at one point, I think like 10 or 14. But Jeff Brom has gotten Purdue and Louisville to their respective conference title games back-to-back years. Great job by him as a coach. Played at Louisville, though. He's a hometown hero. I think he's going to turn Louisville into a pretty solid program going forward. Maybe not being this good every year, but definitely kind of being like how we had Purdue – 8-4, 9-3, always in the mix. That being said, though, I think not having Jordan Travis is so huge. We saw it against Florida, a game where Florida just didn't put the game away. Florida State ended up winning that game, coming back. I just think Louisville wins this game and does the committee a huge favor by not having to consider a Florida State team without Jordan Travis.
Yeah, without Jordan Travis, obviously big disadvantage there for Florida State and what they look like for most of the season and kind of what their offenses looked like the past few years with him. But with the over-under at 48.5, my stat on this game, 9 of the last 10 matchups between Florida State and Louisville have gone over this number for the historical context. With all that being said, though, I do think this is going to be a lower scoring game if Florida State is going to win. I think they try and run the ball with Trey Benson. He's been one of the better running backs in the country, 838 yards, 14 rushing touchdowns, 6.1 yards per carry. He's a workhorse type back, and I think they need to give him 20 to 25 type of carries in this game, type of touches. Just get him the ball and try and bleed clock. Keep the ball out of Rodemaker's hands as much as possible, even with those good receivers. I don't think you want a guy with this little of experience stepping up and trying to make plays in a big game. If Louisville is able to get out ahead early and find a way to just say get up 10-0, 14-0, and you force Florida State to throw from behind, it's going to be a struggle for them. If you're relying on Rodemaker to kind of make some of these big time plays, I think that's where it's going to go downhill for Florida State. So they need to control the clock, control the line of scrimmage, and let that defense that they have go to work as well. So I do think the Seminoles will be able to win that battle up front and keep this a lower scoring game. FSU 24, Louisville 20. So FSU minus 2.5 and the under 48.5. If that is the circumstance, if that is how this game shakes out, I think Florida State will most likely be on the outside looking in come Sunday around noon when that playoff gets released. And it would be a travesty as that was a team I was backing all year, and it seems like they just kind of fell apart at the wrong time with their quarterback in the North Alabama game of all games, probably a game that he didn't even need to play in. So, but Joe, that'll do it. Maybe we'll hop on next week for a quick little 10-minute chit chat just to discuss the playoff rankings and the final who got left out, because there will be someone there will be someone that gets left out that deserves to be in, and that's just going to be the way it goes. And that'll be kind of the sad part about the 14 playoff coming to an end, because it adds a little bit more suspense, a little bit more drama, but 12-team playoff is going to be great as well. But any last second comments before we head into conference championship weekend?
No, we made it. This is it. This is what, the season's been building towards all year. I say it every year. It feels like the college football season goes by way too quick. But that's going to be the beauty of the playoff next year. You're basically getting 2 more weeks of very intense football. This was a great season. We've seen some really legit teams. Teams, like the resurgence of the Pac-12 was fantastic, even though it's the last year ever that they're going to exist. Seeing Michigan and Georgia dominate again. Seeing fun stories like, Louisville rising up, like you said, the UNLV, some of these teams in conference title weekend. Seeing Florida State and Jordan Travis before he got hurt, they were so much fun. This was a great season. Like I said, though, we still haven't gotten that week of chaos. It wouldn't shock me if it was this weekend, because this is definitely the biggest weekend since we've been doing the show for conference title weekend.
All right, well, that will do it. A couple more episodes, and then we're done college football. Next weekend will be our first, or next week will be our first college basketball previewing the biggest games of the weekend. So already back at it there. As always, everyone, thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and we will talk next week for some college hoops.